Hello and welcome, Dmitry here with another Docker tutorial. Today we're going to continue with volumes, and we're going to be looking at what's called bind mounts. So let's take a look at what we had last time. We're going to keep using the Debian image. Okay, so here we had the Debian image, but we could not maintain any sort of storage inside it. Let's stop this image and make a storage for it. Okay, we're ready to recreate a new container. Now, before we do, let's take a look at where I am. This is Linux operating system, so I can use pwd to determine my current path. So home /dmitryard/dev/tutoring/docker. Let's create another folder. I'm going to call it bnd mount. You can call it whatever you want. Actually, I'll just call it bind mount. There we go. Okay, now to mount this volume into our Docker container, we need to use the -v flag for volume. Let's run in detached mode. I'll give it a name, my Debian with mount. -v, and now in order to bind mount this volume into my system, what I'm going to do is use the pwd with a $sign. This is basically a shell command, which is going to take this entire path, which we have here, and add it to the beginning of the string, and then attach this /bind mount to it. And I'm going to mount it into the root folder. I'll just call it my bind mount. Now the name. And now the command. Let's see if this works. I should have probably checked it before, but let me just check that this thing actually outputs correctly. I think I made a mistake here. Anyway, let's see. Let's first go into Docker exec ti. The name I gave it was my Debian bin bash. So now we see we have a new folder here. It's called my bind mount. Okay, let's exit out of the container, cd into bind mount, and now let's create something from inside my host system. Some host file. And I will call it my host file. save it. Okay, cat some. So yeah, we still have this name here. Let's go back into our container. Again, docker exec -ti my Debian, and then to the bin bash. Let's see if this got copied into my bind mount. No, it have not. It seems I did not correctly configure the bind mount, and I think I know what I did wrong. Just give me a second here. I'm going to have to shut down the Docker container again. Okay, we cleaned up the container once again. Yeah, I know exactly what I did wrong. This is something to do with actual how you write Linux commands. There we go. Let's try and rewrite the command again. I'll call it my Debian with mount 2 this time. -v. The value on the left of the colon is the one that is in the host system. The value that's on the right is what it references inside the container. Let's try this time. Container started. Let's go into the container this time. Bind mount 2. So let me just list whatever's inside the bind mount. It's called my bind mount. Nothing inside my bind mount still. Let me exit container, list, and let me take a look if anything is still saved inside the bind mount in our system. Nothing. Let's move the some host file into the bind mount folder. Now that the bind mount is mounted into the container's permission is different than when we first created it. You can see that it is linked to root user. Therefore, I'm going to have to use sudo in order to override the permission. Our host file is in. Let's log back into our container. As you can see, our some host file is inside our container now. And it has the same value that we've set to it, my host file. Okay, now let's create a file inside of our container. We have container file now. Let's exit out of our container and take a look if anything new was added to the bind mount on the host system. As you can see, we have container file as well. Its permission is root, which is different from my home user permission. The permission with which the files inside a container will be created will be the ones which are currently running inside that container. We can configure which user we're running inside the container. However, those are the topics for future videos. Now let's try and install a software inside our container. Nano, for example. For that, we'll need to go back into the container. Since I'm already running as root and I'm inside the container, I do not need sudo. Okay. Installing Nano. And let's edit the file that we created. I'll call it container file. Was created inside this container. Save, close. Okay, let's exit from here and let's take a look if we have that file content still saved. Yes, on our host system it's the same. Let's stop and remove our container now. Let's list them first. Now let's stop and remove this one. Stopping the container. And now let's remove it. As you can see, we stopped and removed the container. However, the files are still inside our directory on our host system. Now let's try to restart another version of the same Docker container. However, we will bind mount the same directory into it and see what happens whether these two files persist. Let me just copy the command. I'll call it my Debian with mount 3. Okay. Okay. The container is now started. My Debian with mount 3. Let's go into it and see if our files are in it. Our folder is in there. Our files are in here, as we can see, and now let's take a look. Container file. Container file has the contents all the same, and the other one will have the same kind of output going on. Here we go. So this is all I wanted to show you during this tutorial. These are called bind mounts, where we mount our host directory, like a directory from our host, into our container and use the files that way. One thing to keep in mind, however, now that we restarted this thing, last time we tried to install Nano. Now if I run Nano this time, it'll say that Nano command is not found, and that is because we did not add any volume to keep the Nano in it. So our installation of the Docker does not have anywhere to keep nano saved in between once we exit. Like, our image does not have nano installed by default. So this is something that we're going to be looking at later on as to how to keep the software installed inside our container as well. For now, when it comes to bind mounts, this is all I wanted to show. Bind mounts are generally for keeping files shared between our host system and our Docker container, or as many Docker containers as we need. And this is it for this tutorial. Like, comment, subscribe, and have yourself a good day. Bye-bye.